right. Okay, so we're going to go over running for office in 2023. Most of this is in our candidates guide, but I know it's hard to digest and you can't ask questions when you're reading our candidates guide. So we thought we'd offer a webinar for you today so you can ask questions. And again, if you have questions throughout the presentation, you can go ahead and pop those into the chat and we'll answer those questions throughout the presentation. Let me get this chat up here so I can see if anybody's asking questions. All right. So today we're going to go over petitions, the circulation and signing of those petitions, when you file those petitions, where and when you file them, objections, who, what, when, what is it, the lottery, how it works, what is it, types of parties, partisan or nonpartisan. There's a lot of nonpartisan parties, well, no parties, nonpartisan is not a party in the consolidated election, and then we'll go over the caucus really quickly. All right, so the elections, let's start off simple. So there will be a consolidated primary, and that is February 28th, 2023. Hard to believe we're already talking about 2023. And then the consolidated general election, which is April 4th in 2023. So are you running in the primary? Yes, if you are in a municipality of over 5,000 people and or a special charter, and you're running for mayor, president, clerk, treasurer, alderperson, or trustee. If you're in a municipality of a population of 5,000 or less, and it's been determined by ordinance no later than November 15th, 2022, that political parties shall nominate candidates for municipal office by primary. Or if you're in a village that has nominated and elected candidates for president and trustee in partisan elections prior to January 1st, 1992. Whoop. So am I running in the primary? Continued. If you're a municipality with a council manager form, so council members at large and from districts, and you're running for mayor or president, clerk and treasurer, and council mayor form only, council members, trustees, or alderpersons. And please note that a village may conduct a nonpartisan primary by referendum. Or if you're in the city of Chicago and you're running for mayor, clerk, treasurer, alderperson, and note if no candidate gets more than 50% in the city of Chicago, a runoff is required. So who's running in a consolidated election? Every other office that wasn't listed, and then those who ran in the primary and need to run obviously because they won, and then they need to run in the general. For the list of candidates that are running in the consolidated general election, you can consult their candidates guide. It's a very long list of nonpartisan offices. If I listed them all here, we would be here all day. So petitions, this is your first step to running for office. So the circulation periods of petitions is 90 days prior to the last day to file. If you're running for the primary, you should already be able to be out there circulating those petitions. It's August 30th. If you're going to be running in the general consolidated election, it's going to be September 20th. So that is coming up here. So what are you going to need? You're going to need your petitions, and then we're going to go over these other things a little bit later, but you'll need your statement of candidacy, your loyalty oath, which is optional, your statement of economic interests, and your Fair Campaign Practices Act, but that is also voluntary. So your petition sheets. So a suggested form for these can be found in our candidates guide or by contacting your local election authority. Please note that most of the forms we have in our candidates guide, it's a suggested form. So a lot of the things that we post are suggested forms. So what this means is the statute has laid out specifically what needs to be on the forms, and then we publish a suggested form that you can use. You don't have to use it. You can create your own form based on what the statute requires. And the required number of signatures that you need to gather varies based on the office that you're running for. And you might be able to find it in our candidates guide, but a lot of these local offices, we don't figure the signatures for, so you're better off contacting your local election authority to figure out what signature requirements are. So circulating, who can circulate your petitions for you? Circulators must be 17 years or older, and they have to be a qualified voter in Illinois. So what that means is that they have to be 18 by election day, because you can vote in the primary if you're going to be 18 on election day. So that's what they mean by that. So the circulator must witness all signatures. They can't circulate for more than one party or an independent candidate in addition to established parties. So they can't circulate a Democratic and a Republican petition in the same election, basically. Let's see here, where was I? They can't circulate for more than one new political party or independent candidates in addition to a new political party. So let's say you're creating the dog and the cat party. They can't circulate one for the dog and the cat party. They could only circulate for the cat party or the dog party. And circulators must complete the statement at the bottom of each petition sheet, basically just saying, yes, I witnessed all these signatures, they're all valid, stuff like that. So signing. So who can sign my petitions? So a signer may not sign more, let me have it, somebody here. So a signer may not sign petitions for candidates for more than one political party for the same election, primary election. So that means, again, that I can't sign a Republican petition and a Democratic petition. And a signer may sign petitions for one established party for the consolidated primary, and then a new political party or independent party for the subsequent consolidated election. So that means if I want to sign a Republican primary or a Republican petition in the primary, it's okay for me to sign a Democratic petition for the general consolidated. I just can't sign two different political parties for the one election. A signer must sign their own signature and cannot sign for someone else. So what this means is if somebody comes to your door and asks you to sign their petition, you can't also sign for your wife. Your wife has to sign her own signature. Signers are free to change affiliation. So what this means is if you voted Republican, you pull the Republican ballot in the primary, but you want to sign a Democratic petition for this upcoming consolidated primary, that is totally fine. You're free to do so. And signers must be registered in the political subdivision in which the candidate is seeking the nomination. So basically you have to be able to vote for the person that you're signing a petition for. Must the circulator get the petition notarized? Somebody can correct me from our staff if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the candidate's responsibility to get that notarized. Is that correct? Can anybody confirm that to me? No. The circulator does? Okay. The circulator does. Okay. The circulator is responsible for getting that petition notarized. Okay, so the statement of candidacy. Let me move you all over here. I got all these boxes open. I can't see my own PowerPoint. So the statement of candidacy is once again a suggested form. So that means that the statute has laid out what needs to be in there. We publish a form based on what the statute says, but it's just a suggested form. You can write up your own form if you choose to do so, as long as it follows what the statute requires. So this suggested form can be found in our candidate's guide or by contacting your local election authority, and it must include the candidate's name, the address, the office that you're seeking, the party, unless you're nonpartisan, and then there'll be a specific nonpartisan statement of candidacy, and the statement that you're qualified to run for office. Qualifications can be found in our candidate's guide. So this is just that you're qualified to run for the office that you're running for, or by contacting your local election authority. So the loyalty oath is optional, and a link to this can be found on our website. This is basically just a statement that kind of goes back to basically the Red Scare, and it says, I'm not a communist, I'm not involved in any foreign political parties or agencies and stuff like that. So it's optional whether or not you choose to submit this with your petitions. So the statements of economic interest, this is required, and you have to obtain this either through us, the Secretary of State Index Department, or your local election authority. And the fair campaign practices, basically this is also optional. It can be found on our website, and this is just something saying I'm going to fight a fair campaign. I'm not going to campaign dirty. So filing. So the filing period for the primary begins November 21st and ends November 28th. And we do want to note here that Thanksgiving lands during this primary during this filing period, as it usually does. We always have a filing period during the Thanksgiving holiday. So you need to prepare for office closures. This filing period will be interrupted by Thanksgiving. I know we're closed on Fridays, so chances are your local election authority might also be closed on that Friday after Thanksgiving. So just prepare that there will be 2 days potentially where you won't be able to file your petitions. And then for the general consolidated election, the filing period is December 12th through December 19th. So binding the petition. So the petition sheets must be, this is what the statute says, the petition sheets must be neatly fastened together in a book form by fastening them together at one edge in a secure and suitable manner. And this picture here haunts all of our dreams here at the state board. This is a picture of a constitutional question a couple of years ago, and you can see that they also have to be bound, and this is what that looks like. Yours won't be nearly as bad to bind. A lot of people just go to an office store and get some binding. It just needs to be bound at the top somehow, so just make sure that you do that. So what will you need to file? We've talked about this a little bit, but now we're going to go in depth a little bit more. So you need to file your petitions, your statement of candidacy, your loyalty oath, which again, that's optional, your statement of economic interest receipt. So the original will be filed with your county clerk, but you need to file that receipt with your petitions. The statement of economic interest needs to be filed by the last day of your filing period. And your Fair Campaign Practices Act, which is again voluntary. Okay to staple the petition sheets together. Yes and no, it's up to, I can't tell you what is okay and what isn't okay. Anything can be objected to. Yeah, so your county clerk says staples are a good way to bind a petition, paper clips are not. Basically, anybody can object to anything. Staples won't come out like a paperclip will, so keep that in mind. So just remember that anybody can object to anything when you're binding, but since they're very thin, staples shouldn't be too bad. Are clerks supposed to look over candidates' petitions when they turn them in? Yes, they should just be looking to make sure that you have filed everything that is required. And that you meet all of the requirements. You filed your statement of candidacy and your statement of economic interest receipt and petition sheets. If you're already elected official and have a statement of economic interest on file, do you need to file again? I believe so. Can anybody from our staff confirm that? Do you need to file a statement of economic interest if you've already filed again? Don't you have to file one every time you run for office? Anyone? Does anyone know the answer to that?
Hey, Beth Ann, can you hear me?
Yes.
If it's within the same calendar year and it's got the same office listed, it should be acceptable. If it's in question at all, I would just file a new one to be on the safe side. So, but again, if it's the same office that you're holding now that you're running for, it should be acceptable. Circling back to that question on the method for binding the petitions, again, there's several different ways that you can bind those and lots of different acceptable ways to do it. The statute just states that it has to be in a secure and suitable manner. So essentially, they're just looking to make sure that it's, you know, when you file it, that pages don't fall out of it. So I would agree with Clerk Theriault that a staple, assuming that it's a smaller petition, would be acceptable as long as, you know, the pages aren't at risk of falling out of there.
Okay. When you say currently file yearly, do we have to file with a different entity? I think you're thinking campaign disclosure, and campaign disclosure is a separate thing from your statement of economic interest. So we'll talk a little bit about campaign disclosure at the end, but campaign disclosure is if you're fundraising. Your statement of economic interest is something that you have to file regardless of if you're fundraising. All right. So where will you file? So you're going to want to contact your election authority or consult the candidate's guide to learn where to file your nomination papers. but generally they will be filed with the principal office of the unit of government for the office you are running for. So objections, everybody's favorite topic. Oh, yes. So somebody says that a critical piece of the petitions is to number the pages consecutively. That is correct. Hey, Brent, can you address the question of whether clerks are supposed to look over the petitions when you file them? There's some debate in the comments.
Yeah, so the actual process for when those are accepted it varies from clerk to clerk. When we're talking about the local election official, that could be your village clerk, it could be your any of the representatives that are designated for those all those different nonpartisan units of government. But when the petitions are filed, they should have a policy that defines what they're looking for, what they will accept, what they will not accept. Generally, these filings should be taken at face value. So they would be looking for general things to see, you know, that you have a statement of candidacy and that there are petitions. And, you know, maybe they're also checking for the receipt for economic interest, but they're not doing a comprehensive evaluation and review of whether or not your petition meets the requirements for filing. They really don't have time to do that deep analysis of your documents. So in general, it's taken at face value. If you have questions about what your local clerk may be looking for, I would suggest calling them to see if they have an apparent conformity policy or if they have a checklist for what they accept or criteria for what they might reject things on. But again, like, you have to keep in mind that simply accepting the petition does not mean that it's all good to go. It's not a comprehensive review of that document. So it leads us into this next segment on objections, which is really more of the thorough vetting of those petitions. And that is, if a deficiency would be found, then it would go through the electoral board process. But Beth-Ann, I'll let you take back on that.
Okay. So this next question is, I've heard that the use of abbreviation on petitions should be avoided, and that the use of ditto marks should also be avoided. So that's kind of getting into objections. Basically, anything can be objected to, and that might be something that they might object to. It's just a standard practice thing. You might want to avoid it just so that it's something that can't be objected to. Your accepting package, should we? That's the village of Fox Lake. That's kind of a question for you, Brent. When we are accepting packets, should we be reviewing, telling the filer pages are not numbered or if pages are missing, or should we just be accepting the packets as they are provided?
So I would recommend having a policy in place that specifies what you were looking for, what you were checking off. It can be very general or it can be more detailed, but essentially the petitions themselves are generally taken at face value. For the State Board of Elections, our policy is very, very minimal when it comes to what we will accept versus what we will reject. If a candidate comes in to file petitions, we accept anything initially as long as it has a statement of candidacy. Beyond that, we will administratively reject it and return it to the candidate if it does not have that signed statement of candidacy and if it does not have at least 10% of the required signatures. So again, this is just a very, very high level, very minimal review of that petition to trigger us to actually reject it. Anything else, we take it at face value, and then it would go through the objection process. Now, obviously, being at the state level, they're very closely watched and scrutinized, and they don't generally slip through the cracks. So somebody is requesting them, looking at copies of them and reviewing them. But anything beyond those bare minimum requirements would go through that objection process and through electoral board proceedings. But as far as what you do, there's certainly other jurisdictions that have more stringent requirements and more stringent scrutiny that's applied to it at the time of filing, but that really becomes your own policy as far as what does and does not meet your kind of definition of apparent conformity.
Yes, Elizabeth, we do offer a bunch of publications, a bunch of guides for election authorities, and I do plan on offering an election authority training for local election officials for 2023 a little bit later. Once we get all of our 2023 publications out, we're still chugging along on those because we're a little bit behind because the primary was later this year and hit us like a brick. All right, so let's go over objections here, everybody's favorite topic. So requirements of objections. So what is required of people who file objections against you? So objections must be filed within 5 business days after the last day for filing nomination papers. And they're filed with the authority the original petition was filed with. Whoops, go back. Okay, there we go. They're only accepted if filed in writing with an original and 2 copies, and the objector must live in the same jurisdiction or district as the candidate they're objecting to. You need to state the interest in the matter. They have to identify the problem or deficiency with the petition or the candidate, and the relief they seek. And generally that relief they seek is they want you off the ballot. To object, one must see another's petition. How does this work? So on a local level, I'm not as familiar with it. I believe they have to request it through the local election official. How does that work? Maybe that's a question for either Brent or Michael, if Michael's on here.
Yeah, it can be done a couple of different ways, but the statute requires that petitions after they're filed be made available for public inspection.
Right.
And so
it's somebody here says FOIA. It's not a FOIA.
It doesn't have to be a FOIA. It can be a FOIA. The problem with FOIA is that
it takes forever.
Yeah, it can take up to 5 business days. However, really time is of the essence when it comes to reviewing petitions. And so making it available for inspection really should be done relatively soon after the filing has been made. For our purposes, the State Board of Elections, there's a brief window of time when it's unavailable, but that's just because we have to go through and catalog it and scan it and go through and document everything that is there and what isn't there. And so we go through that process, and during that time it's not available for public inspection, but that usually is we're able to turn that around within an hour and get copies out pretty quickly on those. So it depends on what your local procedures and your resources kind of allow for there.
Okay, thank
Brent,
you.
I just want to follow up super briefly. At the notion that someone must see another person's petition to object, that's not necessarily the case. The basis of the objection may have nothing to do with a signature line itself, but people have objected to petitions in the past that have never requested a copy from the State Board of Elections, at least. So there is no specific requirement that there be a record that somebody has reviewed your petitions prior to an objection.
Yeah, that's a good point to make. It can be for anything. It's not just that they didn't file the requisite number of valid, petition signatures. It can also be because the person isn't a registered voter, or if they don't live in the district or the within that unit of government, or there's a number of things. Basically, for any reason that person doesn't meet the qualifications for that office could be the reason or justification for that objection.
Do you make all the petitions for all the candidates available at the same time, or do you at least at the state board level, we make them available as soon as we can. We scan them in the order that we receive them, basically, unless we've received a request, and then we try to scan the ones that we've requested first. We've received requests first, but each election official is going to do that in their own way. Okay. So reasons for objections, like I said earlier, basically anything. People can get kind of fickle, but objections can be filed for any reason, including but not limited to not enough signatures from individuals who are not registered to vote, or voters who do not live in the candidate's district, a candidate's residency, like we just previously discussed, validity of the signatures, qualifications of the candidate, format of the petition, or maybe you didn't file that statement of economic interest. So objection notice. You will receive a notice if you've been objected to. So no later than noon on the second business day after the receipt of the objector's petition, the election authority or local election official shall transmit by registered mail or receipted personal delivery to the certificate of nomination or nomination papers and the original objector's petition to the chair of the proper electoral board and the candidate being objected to at the address listed on the nomination papers. So this is one of the reasons you want to make sure that you have the correct address on your nomination papers, because you want to make sure that you're getting that notice. And the chair of the electoral board shall send a call by registered or certified mail to each of the members of the electoral board, the objector, and the candidate, and shall also cause the sheriff of the county or the counties which such officers and persons reside to serve a copy of such call upon each of the officers within 24 hours after receipt of the objector's petition. Basically, if you're objected to, you're going to know. Okay, so lottery. So this is basically if there's been simultaneously filed petitions during opening closing hour. So if you and somebody else filed for the same office, either during the opening hour or the closing hour, you're going to have a lottery to determine who's going to be the first or the last on the ballot. So the lottery must be conducted within 9 days following the last day of petition filing, and it must be open to the public. And you must be provided a 7-day written notice of the time and place the lottery will be conducted. Approved procedures for this lottery for simultaneous filings can be found in the State Board of Elections rules and regulations. And Michael gave me that admin code. It's 201.40. So it seems like it's complicated because there's a lot of words, but I promise it's not that complicated. So the names of all candidates who filed simultaneously for the same office shall be listed alphabetically and shall be numbered consecutively, starting with the number 1, and will be assigned, which will be assigned to the candidate whose name is first on the alphabetical list. All ties will be broken by a single draw. All numbers shall be placed in a container representing each number assigned to each candidate in a group of candidates pursuant to the alphabetical listing. After the numbers are placed in the container, they shall be drawn one at a time from the container after they have been shaken and mixed. The candidate in the position on the alphabetical list corresponding to the first number drawn shall be certified ahead of all of the other candidates, and the second drawn will be certified second, and so forth. It's important to note that if you have a hyphenated name, make sure that you get that hyphenation in there on your petitions, your statement of candidacy, because the way that the lottery works is the hyphenation is very important. You don't hyphenate your name, we go by the last name. If you hyphenate your name, we go by the name that goes before the first name and the last name. So the first name before the hyphenation, basically, if that makes any sense. Right, and then I have this short video that might explain it a little bit easier than I did. Are you guys not able to hear that? I don't know why the sound isn't coming through. Let me see. All right. I tested this weekend and it worked fine. No sound going in. When you share your screen, you need to select share sound. Oh, there it is. Perfect. Board of Elections, the lottery is conducted by pulling lottery balls out of a box. Candidates are put in alphabetical order by last name within their respective office and party. They are then assigned a lottery ball with a number based on the alphabetical order. For example, let's say the office with the most 8 a.m. filers for the first ballot position has 4 candidates. That means we would need 4 lottery balls to conduct the lottery. You would then put all candidates into alphabetical order by their last name and assign them a number. The order the lottery balls are drawn out would be the order the candidate appears on the ballot. If a candidate has 2 last names and they are hyphenated, for example, candidate Adams-Smith, the candidate would be alphabetical. Board of Elections, the lottery is conducted. They are then assigned a, for example, let's say the office with the most 8 a.m. filers for the first ballot position has 4 candidates. That means we would need 4 lottery balls to conduct the lottery. You would then put all candidates into alphabetical order by their last name and assign them a number. The order the lottery balls are drawn out would be the order the candidate appears on the ballot. If a candidate has 2 last names and they are hyphenated, for example, candidate Adams-Smith, the candidate would be alphabetized by Adams. If the candidate has 2 last names that are not hyphenated, for example, candidate Adams-Smith, the candidate would be alphabetized by Smith. Let's go over an example. If we are conducting a lottery for the first ballot position, first thing we need to do is put all candidates within each office in alphabetical order by last name. Office number 1, candidate Apple Adams, would be assigned ball number 1. Candidate Bowie Brothers would be assigned ball number 2. Candidate Kat Carter would be assigned ball number 3. Candidate Happy Davis would be assigned ball number 4. As you can see, all candidates are in alphabetical order by their last name. For office number 2, candidate A. Ann would be assigned ball number 1. Candidate Abe Lincoln would be assigned ball number 2. Candidate James Monroe would be assigned ball number 3. As you can see, these candidates are also in alphabetical order by last name. After these candidates have been put in alphabetical order, we can then draw lottery balls. As you can see, office number 2 does not have as many candidates as office number 1, and in this case, you would just ignore those extra lottery balls when they are drawn. Let us say the order we drew the balls in were 3, 4, 1, and 2. The order of the candidates for each of these offices would then be: office number 1, candidate Kat Carter would be first on the ballot. Candidate Happy Davis would be second on the ballot. Candidate Apple Adams would be third on the ballot. And candidate Bowie Brothers would be fourth on the ballot. For office number 2, candidate James Monroe would be first on the ballot.
Since there is no fourth candidate, you would just ignore the fourth ball that was drawn. Candidate A, Ann, would be second on the ballot, and candidate Abe Lincoln would be third on the ballot.
All right. Glad we finally got that to play. So you could show up the first day at 8 a.m. So you would either have to show up at 8 a.m. or you would have to show up between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. on the last day to enter the lottery process. And that would only be if somebody else running for the same office filed at the same time as you during 8 a.m. or between 4 p.m. and 5 p.m. on the last day. And that's how you enter the lottery process. And that would be for the first position on the ballot for your office or the last position on the ballot or on the ballot position for your office. That's the only difference it makes. If you file at any other time, you're still going to be on the ballot. You just might be in the middle. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm not quite sure. Is just one lottery used for both of these offices? Yeah, so basically there's one lottery for every office. So if we do that for the state board. So for every election, if there's multiple offices up for the lottery, we just have one lottery. So we just pull the balls once, and we have a list of alphabetical orders for every office. So we don't hold multiple lotteries, we just hold one lottery and we have a list for every office. Hopefully that answered everybody's questions. Okay, so there's also a party placement lottery after the ballot. And this is a lottery that's conducted by each election authority for all established parties to determine the proper ballot order of party placement on the ballot. It's held 30 days following, or it's held within 30 days following the proclamation of results from the primary election. And this is done after every election. So it was even done after this recent primary election. And basically what this is, it's determining whether Democratic offices or Republican offices go first on the ballot. And this is just a lottery to determine that. So if you ever show up to the polls and you're like, I wonder why the Democrats are listed first this time. It was the Republicans last time. It's just because that lottery was held. It's not a state determined decision. It's determined individually in each jurisdiction. Okay, so types of parties. So an established party is a party that received more than 5% of the votes cast at the previous election. Now with these local jurisdictions, it's important to keep in mind that that might be more than the Democratic and Republican Party. With these local jurisdictions, that might be a different party as well. So you want to check with your local election authority to see if you have other established parties. It's not just necessarily statewide. So a new party is a political group wishing to form a new political party within a municipality, and they must file petitions with a full slate of candidates for such a political subdivision. And the new political party petition must include a certificate, which is SPE Form P-8C. You can get that from us on our website, which includes the names and addresses of party officers authorized to fill vacancies in nomination. This is just because if you have a new party and somebody has to step down or something happens to somebody, you want to make sure you have somebody who's authorized to step into that seat, who's also a member of your party. And the new party name may not contain more than 5 words. Moreover, it must not bear the name of the same, but moreover, such parties shall not bear the same name as or include the name of any established party. That's just because we don't want to confuse the voter. Let's see here. This is probably a good question for you, Brent. I've had people ask how the clerk does this and if there's a conflict of interest. Clerk is running and will be there to accept packets at 8 a.m. I believe Amanda is referring to the lottery.
Okay,
I
so
can't hear you. Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
Does this, and if it's a conflict of interest for accepting the petitions or for conducting the lottery, I'm not sure exactly what that's referring to. The clerk is running and will be there to accept packets before 8 a.m. I don't know. It's not a conflict of interest. It's a duty of that clerk, and it is common that you will have clerks who are also running. It's reasonable to assign some of those duties to a deputy clerk if that is even a possibility, but that's not even a possibility in a lot of smaller units of government. So it is common for that clerk to accept the filings, to conduct the lottery, all of those details, even though they are also running for those offices. So it's definitely not out of the question that happens.
Somebody's got to do it.
The clerk running and being there to accept packets before 8 a.m., they shouldn't accept any filings before it's open to the entire and to the public for filing. But yeah, everyone should have the same access regardless of who they are. So they shouldn't accept anything before that opening hour. I know that I have heard of this happening, but
she says the public feels it's a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really comment on that other than the fact that the statute prescribes that these clerks do these tasks, and it's their responsibility to do them. It doesn't address not doing it if they're also running for that position again. So it's simply a matter of what is prescribed by state law for them to do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, new party continued. Let's see. So new party candidates seeking office where officers are elected from wards or districts at large. Let's see here. So this is in the case of petitions to form a new political party within a municipality in which officers are to be elected from wards or districts and at large. Such petitions shall be consisted of separate components for each ward or district from which an officer is to be elected, and each component shall be circulated within a ward or district of a political subdivision and signed only by qualified electors who are residents of such ward. So independent candidates are defined as those individuals who are not candidates of each political party, but they're candidates in election, which parties appear on the ballot. Let's see, somebody. So nonpartisan, in these consolidated elections, a large majority of these local elections are nonpartisan. Like I said, we have like 3 pages worth of nonpartisan offices in our candidates guide. So the statutes governing certain units of government require candidates to file for office on a nonpartisan basis. The ballots listing such candidates shall be printed without any party or independent designations on its head. And for a full list of these offices, go ahead and consult our candidates guide because it's very long. So write-in candidates. So our deadline for this upcoming election for write-in candidates is actually Thursday. So if you know anybody who wants to file to be a write-in candidate for the general election, tell them they have to get on that. It's Thursday. But they must file a notarized declaration of intent to be a write-in candidate no later than 61 days prior to the election. And they have to file with the jurisdiction which they are seeking to be a candidate. So they don't file with us. They have to file with that local election official. And if they're running for an office that is in multiple jurisdictions, they need to file with each one. So just for future reference, if you do decide to run for a statewide office, such as, for example, governor, that means you would have to file with all 108 jurisdictions throughout the state, not with the state board. So if the candidate is removed from the ballot after certification or judicial review, they may file as a write-in no later than 7 days prior to the election. So that would be, for example, if you were objected to and thrown off the ballot. If running in the primary, they must receive the number of votes equal to or greater than the number of signatures required on a petition for that office to move on to the general consolidated election. Continued, a candidate who is defeated in the primary may not file to be a write-in the consolidated general election. If you do win as a write-in candidate, you do have to file a statement of candidacy and a receipt for filing that statement of economic interest, unless you're filing for a federal or a party office. and that optional loyalty oath. And now the caucus. It's going to be held December 5th, 2022, if you do have a caucus. So who holds a caucus? Municipalities with 5,000 or less may be determined by ordinance no later than November 15th that established political parties shall nominate candidates for municipal office by a primary election in accordance with Article 7 of the Election Code. So voter participation, only those registered voters who reside within the territory for which the nomination is made shall be permitted to seek, or shall be permitted to vote or take place in the caucus proceedings. And no voter shall vote or take part in the proceedings of more than one caucus or meeting to make a nomination for the same office. So the caucus proceedings, the caucus may make one nomination for each office to be filed at the filled at the consolidated election. Our certificate of nomination by caucus, which is SBE Form H-2, shall be prepared to include the names and addresses of candidates along with the offices for which they were nominated and the established party name. And the presiding officer and secretary of the caucus shall list the addresses and sign the certificate of nomination. And the certificate shall be sworn by them to be true to the best of their knowledge and beliefs and be notarized. Okay, so campaign disclosure is not our department, we're election operations, but I know a lot of you probably have some questions about campaign disclosure as it might be your first time running for office. So I thought I'd throw this in there from their brochure. So candidates or groups that are oops, go back. Sorry, I was admitting somebody. So candidates groups are individuals who raise or spend more than $5,000 in any 12-month period in support of or in opposition to a candidate or question of public policy or for electioneering communication generally must file paperwork to create a political committee with the State Board of Elections. Again, this is separate from your statement of economic interests. You have to file that regardless if you're running for office. This is if you're campaigning or fundraising, you have to file with us at the State Board for campaign disclosure. Any entity other than a natural person who spends more than $5,000 during a 12-month period supporting or opposing a candidate must organize a political committee and file disclosures with the board. Any entity, including a natural person who spends more than $3,000 during a 12-month period on independent expenditures supporting or opposing a particular candidate, is required to file a special written disclosure with the board. Now, like I said, this isn't my expertise. So if you have any questions about campaign disclosure, how to file, do I need to file? How does that all work? They have this really handy dandy campaign disclosure tutorial question thing. They put together all these awesome videos, very helpful. So if you go to our website and you go to the drop-down campaign disclosure, you can see their tutorials. They've got all these helpful videos. So if you have any more campaign disclosure questions, that is the place you want to go. I just popped that in there because I know some of you might have questions on whether your fundraising has to be reported. So if you need help, this is the number to call if you have any questions throughout your process. Election operations is who you want to ask for if you have questions about filing, your petitions, stuff like that. Campaign disclosures, so you want to ask for if you have questions about campaign finance. Do you have to file? Have I fundraised too much? Stuff like that. If you have questions about your statement of economic interests, you want to contact the Secretary of State's office. We can't really help you with that, unfortunately. And before I ask if anyone has any questions, I just want to give a shout out to our social media. Our social media handle is Illinois SBE. We have a Facebook, we have an Instagram, we have a Twitter, we also have a YouTube that'll be posting this on later today. I do the outreach, I do all the social media. I post there every business day. I sometimes post on the weekends. I post about our machine security safety, our voting safety, what we're up to at the SBE, what our local election officials are up to, all types of stuff. You want to follow us for updates on filing, any kind of changes to the rules, all sorts of helpful information, updated webinars, all sorts of stuff. So go ahead and give us a follow there. You will never miss out on anything up to date for the elections. Does anybody have any questions? We got lots of people here who can answer any questions you might have. Are there any required filing deadlines for anything before the November petition week? Or are you talking about campaign disclosure or? Campaign disclosure does have a filing period coming up. It starts October 1st. I can tell you that much. Because I just created an infographic for that.
But that's only, hey Bethany, I'm just chiming in on that question, that it's only if you are registered as a committee. So again, you're not going to automatically have that unless you cross that threshold. So again, if you are required to file, they do send you reminders and notices, and they do have a full calendar.
Okay.
So I would consult those. Beyond that, if they're just talking about the candidate nomination filings before the regular petition filing in November, there are no other required registrations or filings or anything of that, anything like that before that actual week. The only thing would be to make sure that you have your statement of economic interest filed with the proper authorities, so that you have your receipt to file with your petitions during that November filing week.
Minimum and maximum number of signatures petitions. I know it's 5% minimum and 8% maximum of the number of voters in the previous election. Does that mean the one from 2 years prior or 4 years prior for a 4-year term? Also, is it total votes cast or total votes for a specific position?
So this one varies depending upon the office, and I know that's not a favorable answer, but essentially each statute that provides for each individual type of government, and a lot of times will specify their own requirements. If you look in the candidates guide, it will give you the formula for that specific office, and it should also include a definition of what that calculation is based on. So if it's saying that you are basing it on the total votes cast, it generally should say something to define what that means. But if you want to call our office, I'm happy to look it up. I don't have each of the positions committed to memory and what their individual requirement formulas are, but feel free to give our office a call and we can look through that with you.
Yeah, there's a lot of positions in the consolidated with a lot of different requirements, so. Great, does anybody else have any questions? If not, I will be posting this hopefully later today. I plan to upload it to YouTube, and I'll share it to all of our social media. So if you have anybody who wasn't able to attend, they'll be able to view that later, hopefully today. If not, I will definitely have it up by tomorrow. It just depends on how long it takes to process. Oh, here's another question. Is maximum number of signatures enforced? Can it be cause for an objection?
The maximum number is not, I wouldn't expect it to invalidate your petitions. It's going to be something that they're just not considered as part of the petition. So if your maximum number of signatures is 100, but you file 150, they're going to look at the first 100 and look for, the minimum number of valid ones within that first 100. Those last 50 would not be considered as part of that, really as part of that petition or that signature population to be considered from.
So our YouTube is just Illinois State Board of Elections. That's our YouTube page. And then I'll be sharing that also to our social media. So the answer to Quinn O'Brien's question was basically it depends on the office. So if you have a specific question about the signature requirements for your specific office, you can give our office a call and we'll try to help you with that. All right, one last call for questions. And if there are any local election authorities on here, like I said, I do plan on hosting a similar thing from your perspective on what you are required to do and helpful tips for you. We're just waiting for some of our publications to come out for local election officials. Okay, this is a question for you, Brent. When will our Leo guide be out?
It is in for review at the moment. It's prepared. It's just under that last phase of preparation. So we're hoping to have that out soon. Unfortunately, this election cycle has been very challenging, and we had a lot of things that popped up during the time that we're normally working on these. So it has caused a few delays, but I assure you, we are working hard to get those out as soon as possible.
Yeah, so once we get all those out, I will be hosting a similar webinar for you guys, just on what to go over, just a refresher if it's your first time running a consolidated election, so you can ask all the questions from your perspective. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Like I said, I'll get this up later for you today. Thank you.